I don't know what you're talking about.
Naomi, we know he was here. Tell me where he went.
You're wasting your time with me.
This is serious. Hiding him makes you an accessory.
Get out of the car, now! Officer, I haven't done any. I said get out. Officer Travis Mercer's voice hardened. You filthy little rat. Born wrong and acting like you own the street. Hands on the hood. Can you at least tell me why? Shut your mouth. Mercer shoved her forward. Her palms struck the warm metal hood. Where did you steal this car from, trash? It's registered in my name. Sure it is. No thief ever admits to being a thief. People like you are getting bolder every day. He yanked open the car door, grabbed her purse, and threw it onto the road. Papers scattered across the wet asphalt. Let's see what else you stole. Red and blue lights washed over the street. Phones rose from the gathering crowd. No one stepped forward. But Officer Travis Mercer had no idea that the traffic stop he believed was just another ordinary night of power would cost him his badge, his reputation, and his entire career. Earlier, Naomi Whitaker sat alone inside a borrowed office at City Hall. The nameplate on the door still belonged to the recently retired police commissioner, Leonard Vance. His replacement had not yet been publicly announced. That was intentional. A single desk lamp cast a warm yellow circle across several inches of paperwork. Complaint files, internal affairs case numbers, folders stacked so high that some of the pages curled at the edges. Naomi opened the top folder and pressed her thumb against the first page. Officer Travis Mercer, badge number 4412. 14 complaints over 6 years. Excessive force, unlawful search, racial profiling, verbal abuse. Every complaint had been filed by a black resident. Every single one had been dismissed. Naomi turned the page. A woman named Bernice Tate had written her statement in pencil. Even the handwriting seemed to tremble. Bernice described being pulled from her car on Maplewood Avenue late at night. No explanation, no warning, only hands gripping her collar and pavement beneath her knees. The supervising sergeant had stamped the complaint unfounded in red ink. The case was closed shortly afterward. Naomi opened another complaint. A young college student named Darius Sims had been pulled over because Mercer claimed one of his taillights was broken. It was not. Mercer searched his vehicle for nearly an hour. He found nothing. When Darius asked why he had been stopped and searched, Mercer cited him for obstructing an officer. The citation was eventually thrown out. The complaint against Mercer remained buried. Naomi did not skim the documents. She read every word, every name, every accusation, every detail. She wanted to know exactly who Officer Travis Mercer was before she ever saw his face. She simply did not know she would meet him before the night was over. Earlier, Mayor Denise Carver had asked Naomi to meet privately in a downtown hotel conference room. There was no press, no staff, just 2 chairs and a large window overlooking the river. The department is bleeding trust, Mayor Carver said. She slid a manila envelope across the table. 63 excessive force complaints in 18 months. 29 involved allegations of racial bias. Naomi opened the envelope. Internal Affairs closed every single one. The numbers confirmed what residents had been saying for years. Mayor Carver continued, I need someone who won't protect the old guard. Naomi looked up. Someone the officers can't intimidate. Someone who understands what it feels like to stand on the other side of one of these complaints. Naomi studied her. You're offering me the job. I'm asking you to take it. Mayor Carver leaned back. We'll announce it publicly soon. Until then, no one outside this room knows. Naomi took the envelope home. She read every page several times before accepting the position. Now, only a short time remained before the public announcement. Captain Renee Porter from Internal Affairs called Naomi. Her voice sounded tense. Commissioner, I need you at the precinct. Naomi immediately sat straighter. What happened? I pulled the original case files on the officers flagged for review. Porter paused. Some of the files have been altered. Naomi's expression hardened. Altered how? Pages are missing. Dates have been changed. Documents are out of sequence. Another pause. Someone inside the department is cleaning house before you can get there. Naomi grabbed her keys. She did not change clothes. No uniform. No official vehicle. No escort. No sirens. She wanted to see the precinct exactly as an ordinary civilian would see it. Unannounced. Unprotected. She drove her own car, a dark blue sedan several years old. Nothing about it suggested authority. She took the longer route through the East Side neighborhoods where most of the complaints had originated. Maplewood Avenue, Luther Street, Division Road. She knew the names from the files. She had memorized them. Several consecutive blocks had broken streetlights. Naomi noticed. Broken glass glittered in her headlights at an intersection. She noticed that too. A patrol car sat at a gas station with its engine running and dark windows. No officer was visible. Naomi mentally recorded that as well. This was the district Travis Mercer considered his territory. The place where he decided who looked suspicious, who looked safe, who deserved explanation, and who did not. The place where complaints disappeared into filing cabinets no one opened. Naomi's phone buzzed on the center console. Captain Porter, files are ready. How far out? Naomi typed back. Not far. She never reached the precinct on her own. Red and blue lights suddenly appeared in her rearview mirror. There was no siren at first. Only the lights. Slow, deliberate, almost predatory. Naomi checked her speed. She was below the posted limit. She activated her turn signal and pulled carefully to the curb. Then she placed both hands on the steering wheel and waited. Heavy boots struck the pavement behind her. Slow footsteps. Unhurried. A flashlight beam swept through the rear window before settling on the side of her face. The officer did not introduce himself. He apparently believed he did not need to. The badge, the gun, the darkness. Those things spoke for him. License and registration. Naomi moved slowly toward the glove compartment. 2 fingers visible. Exactly the way her father had taught her as a teenager. I said license and registration, not whenever you feel like giving them to me. I'm getting them now, officer. She handed both documents through the window. He snatched them from her hand. He barely looked at them. His flashlight remained fixed on her face, moving slightly from side to side, as though he were inspecting something unpleasant. Naomi Whitaker. He said her name as though it tasted bitter. And what exactly is Naomi Whitaker doing crawling around this neighborhood this late? Driving to a meeting? A meeting. He let the word hang in the air. A meeting in this part of town? He rested one forearm on the roof of her car. You want to try that answer again? That is my answer, officer. His jaw tightened. He stepped back. The flashlight moved into the rear seat, then across the passenger side. The beam stopped on the thick manila folder lying there. Color-coded tabs. Internal affairs seal visible in the corner. What's that? Personal documents. Personal documents. He repeated her answer in a flatter, more mocking tone. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, may I ask why? You can ask whatever you want from outside the car. His voice hardened. Step out. Naomi turned off the engine. She opened the door with her left hand while keeping her right hand visible. Both feet touched the asphalt. She stood. She was 5'7". Mercer stood well over 6 feet. He made sure she felt every inch of the difference. Hands on the hood. Naomi placed both palms flat against the metal. The hood was still warm. The night air carried the heavy southern heat that seemed to cling to skin, pavement, and concrete. Spread your feet. She obeyed. A car on the opposite side of the street slowed. Then another. Headlights passed across her back. She heard a window roll down. Someone was watching. Naomi kept her eyes forward. Officer Travis Mercer circled her like a man inspecting property he already believed belonged to him. He patted her shoulders, her sides, her waist. The search lasted longer than procedure allowed. Naomi knew exactly what procedure allowed. She had recently reviewed the department's updated training manual. You're awfully calm for someone being searched on the side of the road, Mercer said. Should I not be calm? Most people in your position aren't. Naomi turned her head slightly. And what position is that? Mercer did not answer. He walked to the passenger side of her car and opened the door. No permission, no warrant, no probable cause. He reached inside and picked up the folder. Naomi's stomach tightened, not from fear, from recognition. A line from Bernice Tate's complaint flashed through her mind. He opened my car door without permission and searched through my belongings while I stood on the curb. Then another statement. Darius Sims. He searched my glove compartment, my backpack, even my gym bag. He never told me what he was looking for. Naomi was no longer merely reading their words. She was living them, standing where they had stood, breathing the same air. Mercer flipped through the folder beneath the beam of his flashlight. He barely looked at the pages. If he had read them carefully, he would have seen his own name on the first page. What is this? He glanced at her. Some kind of legal paperwork? He tossed the folder back onto the seat. Several pages slid free and scattered across the leather. You some kind of paralegal? No. A lawyer? No. Then what are you? Naomi looked directly at him. A citizen with rights you are currently violating. Something changed in Mercer's face. Not simple anger, something colder. The expression of a man unaccustomed to hearing resistance from someone he had already decided should be afraid of him. You've got a real smart mouth. Another patrol car arrived. Its flashing lights doubled the blue and red glow across the street. Lieutenant Bryce Dalton stepped out, adjusting his duty belt. He walked toward Mercer. The two men spoke quietly. Naomi caught pieces of the conversation. Driving slow, suspicious, wouldn't cooperate. None of it was true. Every word would probably appear in the official report. Dalton looked at Naomi. He did not acknowledge her as a human being. He looked at her the way someone looks at a problem requiring paperwork. Mercer returned to the vehicle. Then he opened the trunk without permission. He pulled out a gym bag, unzipped it, dumped everything onto the asphalt. Sneakers, a water bottle, a change of clothes. Mercer kicked through the items with his boot. "Officer, that is my personal property. Everything in this car is my business now." He reached beneath the driver's seat and pulled out a small umbrella. He held it up as though he had discovered evidence. "What's this for?" Naomi stared at him. "Do you have a weapon in here too?" "It's an umbrella." "Sure it is." He threw it onto the pile. Dalton stood near the second patrol vehicle, arms crossed. Smiling, Mercer found a leather planner in the center console. He opened it, then began reading Naomi's handwritten entries aloud. "Meeting with R. Porter." He turned a page. "Precinct review." Another page. "Personnel files." Mercer looked toward her. "You writing a book about us?" "Those are private notes." "Nothing is private on my street." He threw the planner onto the hood. It slid across the metal and fell onto the pavement. He did not pick it up. Dalton did not pick it up. No one did. Naomi stood silently. Her belongings were scattered across the road like garbage. Every item touched. Every boundary crossed. Exactly the way another complainant had described in one of the case files. Word for word. "You want to call it in?" Dalton asked. "Already did," Mercer replied. "I'm taking her to the precinct." Naomi looked at him. "For what?" Mercer turned. "For whatever I decide." He said it with the casual certainty of a landlord saying, "Because I own the building." No justification required. No appeal available. A small crowd began gathering on the sidewalk. 5 people. Then more. A teenager raised a phone and started recording. An older woman wearing a bathrobe stood with her arms crossed, slowly shaking her head. She had seen this before. Everyone on that block had seen something like this before. "Can someone call?" the older woman began. Mercer spun toward her. "Ma'am, step back unless you want to join her." The woman stepped back. The teenager kept filming. Mercer turned toward Naomi. "You want to make this easy or hard?" "I want to make it legal." He smirked. "Cute." Mercer grabbed Naomi above the elbow. Not gently, not like someone guiding another person, like someone moving furniture. He marched her toward the patrol car. Naomi's mind cataloged every detail. Another complaint came back to her. "He grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. I showed the bruise to internal affairs. They said it wasn't enough." Then another. "He told me to stop resisting. I wasn't resisting. I was standing still." Naomi was not resisting either, but she was recording everything, not with a phone, with a mind trained to hold details the way a courtroom holds evidence. Mercer opened the rear door. "Get in." "Am I under arrest?" "You're being detained." "On what charge?" "Suspicion." "Suspicion of what?" Mercer leaned close enough for Naomi to smell stale coffee on his breath. The same cheap precinct coffee she would soon be responsible for ordering by the case. "Suspicion of not knowing your place." Then he placed his hand on top of her head and pushed her into the back seat. The door slammed. The locks clicked. The metal partition rattled once, then went still. Through the window, Naomi watched the crowd grow larger. Phones everywhere. Blue light painted every face. The older woman in the bathrobe was crying now, not specifically because of Naomi, because of the familiarity of what she was witnessing, because this had become routine, because on this street, scenes like this had happened too many times before. Dalton climbed into the passenger seat. Mercer got behind the wheel. Neither man looked back at Naomi. She was cargo now. The patrol car pulled away. Naomi's sedan remained beneath a broken streetlight. The internal affairs folder still lay open on the passenger seat. Mercer's name was still printed on the first page. Naomi said nothing during the ride. She did not need to. Everything she needed was already documented. And soon, She would have the authority to make sure Travis Mercer was finally forced to read every word. The precinct smelled of floor wax and old paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, draining the color from everything. Mercer walked Naomi through a side entrance. One hand gripped her arm. The other held his radio. "Got a live one," he said into the microphone, bringing her into processing. The hallway was narrow. Bulletin boards covered the walls. Wanted posters, union notices, a flyer announcing a retirement party. Naomi's eyes stopped briefly on a framed photograph near the front desk. Former Commissioner Leonard Vance shaking hands with the governor. Vance had recently retired. Soon, that frame would hold another photograph. Hers. Mercer shoved open the booking room door. Two officers sat behind a counter, one typing, the other scrolling through his phone. Both looked up. "What do we have?" the typing officer asked. His nameplate read Officer Voss. "Traffic stop on Division Road," Mercer said. "Wouldn't cooperate. Suspicious behavior, car full of paperwork she refused to explain." He recited the accusations like items on a grocery list. Clean, rehearsed, every word a lie wrapped in official language. Voss looked at Naomi, then at the handcuffs, then back at Mercer. She resisted? She had an attitude. Voss asked nothing else. He pulled out a booking form. Name, date of birth, address. The system moved smoothly, efficiently, indifferently, exactly as designed. "Sit over there." Mercer pointed toward a metal bench bolted to the wall. No backrest, no comfort. Naomi sat. The handcuffs dug into her wrists. She shifted her hands, trying to find a position that did not press metal directly against bone. There was none. Dalton entered carrying 2 coffees. He handed one to Mercer. They stood only a few feet from Naomi and discussed her as though she were not sitting there. "You should have seen her face," Mercer said with a grin. "Sitting there with her little folder like she was somebody." Dalton laughed, not loudly. The easy laugh of someone who had heard the same kind of joke many times and still found it amusing. "She say what the paperwork was. Said it was personal." "Personal?" Mercer shook his head. "Driving through the east side late at night with a stack of documents. Tell me that isn't suspicious." "Could be anything," Dalton said. "Exactly." Mercer took a drink. "Could be anything. That's why she's here." Naomi listened. She did not react. She was cataloging, not just their words, their tone, their posture, the way their bodies positioned themselves between her and the exit, the way Voss kept typing without looking up, as though processing an innocent woman was no different from entering a parking citation. This was how the system functioned, not through dramatic speeches, not always through shouting, sometimes through small, practiced acts of erasure. Take someone's name and turn it into a case number. Take their evening and turn it into an incident report. Take their dignity and call it procedure. Naomi's phone vibrated inside her pocket. They had not taken it yet. Once, again, and again. Almost certainly Captain Porter, wondering why the incoming commissioner had failed to arrive at one of the most important meetings of her career. Naomi did not answer. Not yet. Another officer entered from the rear hallway. Younger, perhaps in his late 20s. His uniform was sharply pressed. His boots looked new. He saw Naomi on the bench, hands cuffed. Then he looked at Mercer leaning against the counter, laughing. Something moved across the young officer's face. Not recognition, discomfort. "Is she being charged?" he asked. Mercer slowly turned. "You have a question about my stop, rookie. I'm asking whether there's a charge. There will be when I finish writing the report." The young officer's badge read Collins. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked toward Naomi once more, then walked to a desk in the back corner. He sat down. He said nothing else. Naomi watched him. A complaint from the file surfaced in her memory. Complaint number 11, filed anonymously by another officer. Only a few sentences. "I witnessed Officer Mercer use excessive force during a routine stop. I reported it to my sergeant. My sergeant told me to forget about it. I am filing this because I cannot." That officer had been transferred soon afterward. The complaint vanished. Collins was silent too. The culture inside this building was older than any one man. It existed before Mercer pinned on a badge. It would remain vintage after he took it off, unless someone tore it out by the roots. Mercer walked toward Naomi. He crouched until they were eye level. She could see a coffee stain near his collar. "Here's what's going to happen." His voice was quiet. "I'm going to write that you were driving erratically, refused to comply, and made threatening gestures." Naomi stared at him, You're gonna sit here until I decide what to charge you with. He smiled slightly. And when you finally get in front of a judge, maybe you'll understand how this works. He waited for fear. Naomi gave him none. You don't scare easily, do you? No, that'll change. He stood. They all break eventually. Mercer returned to the counter. He pulled out a yellow legal pad. Naomi watched him write. His handwriting was sloppy and slanted. From where she sat, she could see enough. He was manufacturing the report in real time. Erratic driving. Check. Failure to comply with lawful command. Check. Aggressive behavior. Check. Every sentence was false. Every checkmark could become a nail hammered into someone's future. Yet Mercer wrote them as casually as most people wrote a shopping list. No hesitation. No reflection. No guilt. This was exactly what the complaint files had described. Not one bad night. A system. A practice. A man who had transformed abuse into routine and routine into professional confidence. 14 complaints. And each dismissed complaint had made him more confident. Not less. Because every vanished complaint taught him the same lesson. No one is watching. No one cares. Do it again. Naomi's wrist throbbed. She pressed her thumbs together behind the cuffs, trying to relieve the pressure. The metal had warmed to her body temperature. It felt almost like part of her now. She thought about Bernice Tate's handwritten complaint, the trembling pencil marks. Bernice had described sitting on a bench like this, under lights like these, listening to the same kind of laughter, watching an officer write on the same kind of yellow legal pad. Bernice Tate was a 58-year-old grandmother, a school bus driver. Her complaint had been dismissed almost immediately. Naomi looked again at Leonard Vance's framed photograph. His administration had allowed those dismissals to stand. The booking room phone rang. Voss answered. He listened, then covered the receiver with his palm. Mercer, there's a woman on the phone. Says she watched you pull someone over on Division Road. She wants to file a complaint. Mercer did not look up. Tell her to come in during business hours. She says she's recording the call. Then hang up. Voss hung up. No hesitation. No written note. No record. The complaint died in seconds. Naomi watched the process unfold the way a surgeon watches a familiar operation. Clean. Practiced. Invisible to anyone who did not know what to look for. This was how 14 complaints disappeared. Not necessarily through secret meetings in dark rooms. Sometimes through tiny acts of refusal at a front desk. A phone call ended. A form never created. A report misplaced. A sergeant saying, "Forget about it." An officer obeying. Dalton pulled out his phone. He scrolled through social media, then laughed. Someone's already posting about your stop. He turned the screen toward Mercer. A blurry image taken from the teenager's video. Naomi's hands against the hood. Red and blue lights behind her. The caption read, "Another night on Division Road." Let them post, Mercer said. He barely glanced at the image. Nobody watches that stuff anyway. He was wrong. Millions of people would soon prove it. Mercer's phone rang. He answered, listened, then frowned. Sergeant Reed wants to know why there's a civilian in booking without a charge sheet, Mercer told Dalton. Tell him it's in progress. I did, he's coming down. Mercer shrugged. Let him come. He returned to his legal pad. My stop, my call. Still writing. Still fabricating. Still constructing a paper cage around a woman whose signature would soon determine whether he kept his badge. The hallway door opened. Heavy footsteps approached. Measured. Not hurried. Not casual. The footsteps of someone who already knew something was wrong. Sergeant Marcus Reed appeared in the doorway. He stopped. His eyes found Naomi sitting on the bench. Every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Reed did not move. His hand tightened around the doorframe as though it were the only thing holding him upright. Mercer did not notice. His back was still turned. He continued writing. Sarge, you hear about the stop? Mercer chuckled. She was driving through Division Road late at night, acting all. Officer Mercer. Sergeant Reed's voice cut across the room. Not loud. Worse than loud. Controlled. The kind of voice that arrives just before someone's world collapses. Mercer stopped writing. He turned. Take the handcuffs off that woman. Mercer blinked. Right now. Mercer looked at Reed. Then Naomi. Then laughed nervously. Sarge, come on. She's just some, That is Commissioner Naomi Whitaker. The words detonated in the room. Mercer's smile did not simply disappear. It broke. Piece by piece. First his mouth. Then his jaw. Then his eyes. Each second brought another level of understanding. Another realization of what he had done. Dalton tried to place his coffee on the counter. The cup missed. It fell. Coffee spread across the floor. No one moved to clean it. Voss stopped typing. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. Collins stood from his desk in the back corner. He said nothing. His face said enough. That's not... Mercer struggled to speak. She doesn't... The words would not come. She was just in my car. She was... I didn't... His mouth kept moving. Language had abandoned him. Nobody told me. Sergeant Reed stared at him. Nobody had to tell you. Mercer froze. You had no lawful reason to stop her. Reed stepped farther into the room. You had no reason to search her. Another step. You had no reason to bring her here. His voice remained calm. Commissioner or not, you had no right to do any of what you did tonight. Mercer stood motionless. The yellow legal pad hung from his hand. The fabricated report. The ink barely dry. Every lie he had written was no longer evidence against Naomi. It was evidence against him. Take off the cuffs, Reed repeated. Now, Mercer walked toward Naomi. The boots that had sounded so powerful on the asphalt earlier now shuffled weakly across the linoleum. He reached for the handcuff key. His hands shook so violently that the key scraped against the metal before he finally found the lock. One cuff opened, then the other. Naomi stood. Slowly, she rotated her wrists. Deep red marks circled both of them. Marks that would remain visible for days. She did not rub them. She wanted everyone in that room to see. Naomi looked directly at Mercer. Not with rage. Not with satisfaction. With something worse for him. Recognition. The same recognition she had felt when reading his name on the first page of the complaint file. The same recognition she had felt reading Bernice Tate's trembling handwriting. Naomi knew him, not merely from what had happened that night. From 14 complaints. From 6 years of patterns. From data. From stories. From a system that had protected him until the moment it no longer could. Mercer opened his mouth. Commissioner, I didn't know. Naomi said nothing. If I had known. She repeated the phrase quietly. If you had known. Mercer stopped. Naomi stepped closer. If you had known I was the commissioner, you wouldn't have done this? Mercer nodded. Desperate. Almost relieved. As though Naomi had offered him an excuse. That's exactly the problem. His expression collapsed again, because he had just confessed, in front of witnesses, that his behavior depended on who he believed mattered. That his respect was conditional. That rights, in his mind, were optional. The only thing separating Naomi from Bernice Tate, Darius Sims, and every other person named in those files was a title he had not known she possessed. Naomi turned toward Sergeant Reed. Call Captain Porter. Reed immediately reached for his phone. Tell her I won't need the meeting we planned. Naomi looked at Mercer. Tell her to come here instead. She paused. And tell her to bring the full case files on every officer flagged for internal affairs review. Reed was already dialing. Naomi looked around the booking room. At Voss, frozen over his keyboard. At Dalton, standing beside spilled coffee. At Collins, who had tried to question what was happening and then fallen silent. At the framed photograph of the former commissioner. Naomi reached into her pocket and removed her phone. Multiple missed calls. Captain Porter. The mayor's office. Other numbers. She called Porter. Renee. Naomi's voice was calm. Change of plans. She looked at Mercer. The investigation starts now. A pause. I have everything I need. She ended the call and placed the phone on the counter beside Mercer's yellow legal pad. Beside the fabricated report that now read like a signed confession. Mercer had not moved. He stood in the middle of the booking area. His badge remained pinned to his chest. His gun remained on his hip. Every physical symbol of authority he had carried for years was still attached to him. But suddenly, none of it seemed to mean anything. The room remained silent. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere deeper inside the building, a printer began running. The process had already started. Captain Renee Porter arrived through the front entrance, not the side. She wanted every officer inside the precinct to see her walk in. She carried 2 heavy file boxes. She placed them on the booking counter. The sound made Mercer flinch. Heavy, final, the sound of a career being weighed. Porter first looked at Naomi, then at the red marks around her wrists, then at Mercer. Commissioner Whitaker, are you injured? I'm fine. Porter looked again at her wrists. Your wrists suggest otherwise. Then she turned toward Sergeant Reed. I want Officer Mercer's body camera footage pulled immediately, every second from the moment he activated his emergency lights. Mercer stepped forward. Captain, I can explain. Porter looked at him. It was a routine traffic stop. I didn't know who she was. I was only doing your job. Porter finished the sentence. Mercer stopped speaking. She opened the first file box, then placed several folders across the counter. Each tabbed, each documented. The strongest cases among the 14 complaints. Cases that should have ended Mercer's career years earlier. 14 complaints over 6 years, Porter said. Everyone filed by a black resident. Mercer stared at the folders. Everyone involving a traffic stop. She opened one. Everyone describing the same pattern. Another folder. Unlawful stop. Another. Verbal abuse. Another. Illegal search. Another. Physical intimidation. Another. Fabricated charges. Porter looked directly at Mercer, and every single complaint was dismissed. Naomi stepped forward. She removed several folded pages she had managed to keep from the documents in her car. She unfolded them beside Porter's files. These are the complaints I was reviewing before Officer Mercer stopped me. Her voice remained perfectly controlled. No trembling, no shouting, only precision. Bernice Tate described an officer opening her car door without permission. Naomi looked at Mercer. You did that to me. She touched the next page. Darius Sims described his vehicle being searched without a warrant and without cause. Another pause. You did that to me. She moved to another statement. Another complainant described being told to stop resisting while standing completely still. Naomi held up her wrists. You handcuffed me because I asked you why I had been stopped. Mercer said nothing. Every complaint describes what you did tonight. Naomi's eyes remained fixed on him, almost word for word. She stepped closer. You didn't merely violate my rights. Her voice lowered. You performed your entire pattern in front of the one person who had memorized it. Mercer opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His hand instinctively moved toward his badge, like a drowning man reaching for something solid. Dalton began moving toward the hallway. One step, then another. Lieutenant Dalton. Captain Porter's voice stopped him instantly. He turned. You were present at the stop. I arrived afterward. You arrived while it was happening. Porter did not blink. You witnessed an unlawful search. Dalton's face began losing color. You witnessed a detention without probable cause. She stepped toward him. You did nothing. Dalton swallowed. You stayed. Another step. You watched. Her voice sharpened. You laughed. Dalton looked at the floor. You are part of this. Porter turned back toward Mercer. Badge and weapon on the counter. Mercer did not move. Now. Silence. Porter leaned forward slightly. That was not a request. Mercer slowly reached toward his chest. His hand shook as he unclipped the badge. The pin caught in the fabric. He pulled again. Finally, it came free. The badge struck the counter. A small sound, yet it seemed to echo across the entire room. Then his gun. Mercer removed it carefully and placed it beside the badge. Both hands, as though setting down something sacred. You are suspended without pay, effective immediately, Porter said. Pending investigation into civil rights violations, unlawful detention, falsification of an official police report, and conduct unbecoming an officer. She turned toward Dalton. Same order. Dalton removed his badge and weapon much faster. His hands did not shake. They seemed numb. Captain Porter picked up Mercer's yellow legal pad. She slipped it into an evidence bag she had brought with her. She had arrived prepared. This report is now evidence in a civil rights investigation. Mercer stared at it. Every word was written in the presence of the woman you unlawfully detained. Porter sealed the evidence bag. The woman who holds the highest law enforcement position in this city. Mercer's eyes dropped toward his badge. You wrote your own evidence, Officer Mercer. She held up the sealed bag. In your own handwriting. Mercer stared. At the legal pad. At the badge. At the gun that was no longer his to carry. Years on the force. Years believing the badge made him untouchable. And now some of the strongest evidence against him had come directly from his own hands. The teenager's video soon reached the internet. The footage shook slightly because it had been recorded from across the street. But the audio was clear. Every order, every insult, every word. The camera captured Mercer's flashlight shining into Naomi's face. Her palms pressed against the hood. Her belongings scattered across wet pavement. It captured the insults, the contempt, the way he treated her before learning who she was. The caption read, Cop handcuffs black woman during traffic stop. She's the city's new police commissioner. Millions watched. Major news networks picked up the footage. Television stations repeatedly showed side-by-side images of the traffic stop and Naomi's official appointment photograph. Social media turned Mercer's name into a national hashtag. Hashtag Mercer exposed. Mayor Denise Carver held a press conference. She stood behind a podium bearing the city seal. What happened was not an isolated incident. Cameras clicked. It was the product of a culture that has been protected for far too long. Naomi stood behind her. Mayor Carver continued, "I appointed Commissioner Whitaker to change that culture." She paused. And before she had even been publicly introduced to the city, she experienced firsthand exactly why that change is necessary. Naomi did not speak. She did not need to. The red marks around her wrists were still visible. The cameras found them. Every photographer found them. A federal investigation followed. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened an inquiry. Captain Porter had already laid the groundwork. Altered case files, missing pages, changed dates. Everything suggested an institutional cover-up extending far beyond one officer. A retired captain who had supervised Mercer for years was subpoenaed. Captain Warren Vance, brother of former Commissioner Leonard Vance. Warren had signed many of the dismissals involving Mercer. He had transferred the officer who filed an internal complaint. Investigators discovered that evidence had been removed from at least one case file, including photographs documenting physical injuries. The investigation pulled one thread. The entire garment began coming apart. A public hearing was eventually convened at City Hall. Hundreds filled the room. Hundreds more gathered outside, watching on screens. Former victims came forward to testify. Bernice Tate went first. She sat in the witness chair, holding the same pencil she had used to write her original complaint years earlier. She had kept it in her purse, never thrown it away. "He pulled me out of my car on Maplewood Avenue," Bernice said. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room. "He called me trash." The room remained still. "He searched my car for a long time and found nothing." She looked toward the panel. "When I filed a complaint, they told me it was unfounded." Her fingers tightened around the pencil. "They said I was exaggerating." She shook her head. "I wasn't exaggerating." Her voice strengthened. "I wrote down every word he said." Bernice looked toward Naomi. "And years later, I watched him say the same things to the police commissioner." Darius Sims testified next. He had graduated from college. He now worked as a paralegal. At one point, he had considered law school. But his experience with Mercer had made him afraid of the very system he had once hoped to serve. "He told me I was obstructing," Darius said. He looked around the hearing room. "I was asking why." A pause. "That's all I was doing." His voice lowered. "Asking why." Another victim, Malcolm Cole, described the night Mercer searched his van outside a grocery store while his two children sat crying in the back seat. Yolanda Brixton described being stopped repeatedly within a short period by the same officer. Vernon Hadley, a retired postal worker, described being forced to lie on wet pavement while Mercer stood over him and laughed. Every testimony was different. Every life was different. But the pattern was the same. The same officer. The same behavior. Again and again. For years. Inside a district where accountability had disappeared. The final witness from inside the department was not one of Mercer's civilian victims. It was Officer Collins, the young officer who had asked one simple question in the booking room. "Is she being charged?" and had been silenced with a look. Collins sat in the witness chair. His hands were folded. He was no longer wearing a police uniform. He had resigned. "I knew it was wrong," Collins said. "The moment I walked into that booking room, I knew." He looked down. She was sitting there in handcuffs. He paused, and he was laughing. The room remained silent. "I asked whether there was a charge." Collins swallowed. "He told me to mind my own business." His eyes lowered. "So I sat down." Another pause. "I went quiet." The hearing room waited. "I went quiet because I had seen what happened to the last officer who spoke up." Collins looked toward the panel. "Transferred. Complaint disappeared. Career damaged." He took a breath. "And I told myself staying silent was the smart thing to do." His voice tightened. "I told myself I could fight from the inside, that someday I'd have enough authority to change things." He looked directly at the commissioners. "But that night, I learned something." The room seemed to hold its breath. Silence is not waiting for the right moment. His eyes moved toward Naomi. Silence is the system working exactly the way it was designed to work. He paused. "I was part of it." His voice became firmer. "I'm here because I refuse to be part of it anymore." Something moved through the gallery. Not exactly applause. Something deeper. The sound of hundreds of people finally exhaling. The sound of a truth held underwater for too long finally reaching the surface. Naomi testified last, not as commissioner, as victim number 15. I read these files before I ever met Officer Mercer. Her voice was calm. I studied the patterns. She looked toward the evidence table. I memorized the language. Then toward the hearing panel. And when he stopped me on Division Road, I recognized every step. She began listing them. The unjustified stop. The fabricated explanation. The search without cause. The escalation. The handcuffs. The false report. Naomi paused. It was all there. Her eyes moved toward the former victims. Exactly as described. Another pause. Exactly as documented. Her voice hardened. And exactly as dismissed. Silence. These complaints were not exaggerations. They were not unfounded. They were accurate descriptions of an officer who believed he could do whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted, as long as no one important was watching. Naomi looked directly toward Mercer. And for years, the system proved him right. She let the words settle. For years, it proved him right. Formal charges followed. Travis Mercer was indicted on multiple federal counts. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Unlawful detention. Falsification of official documents. Witness intimidation. He faced years in federal prison. Bryce Dalton was charged for failing to intervene and for his role in the misconduct. The retired captain who had helped bury complaints faced charges involving obstruction of justice and tampering with official records. Former Commissioner Leonard Vance came under investigation for institutional negligence. After the hearing, Bernice Tate stepped out of City Hall into the sunlight. A reporter approached. "How do you feel?" Bernice raised the pencil she had kept all those years. "They told me my words didn't matter." She looked at it, then toward the cameras. Today they mattered. Later, Naomi Whitaker stood behind a podium inside City Hall. This time, the room was not filled primarily with reporters. Residents were there, community leaders, police officers who had remained because they believed in what the badge was supposed to represent. And in the front row sat the people who had waited years to hear what Naomi was about to announce. "Effective today," Naomi said. "Every officer in this department will wear an active body camera for the duration of every shift." She looked across the room. No exceptions. No unauthorized overrides. No convenient off switches. The room remained silent. Not the silence of shock. The silence of something long overdue finally arriving. Effective today, every complaint against an officer will be reviewed through independent civilian oversight. She paused, not solely by internal affairs, not simply by a captain, not by someone whose first instinct is to protect the uniform instead of investigate the truth. Naomi looked toward the front row. Civilians will have a direct role. People from the neighborhoods these officers are sworn to serve. She continued, every officer will complete 40 hours of de-escalation training before returning to patrol. She leaned slightly toward the microphone. And they will repeat that training every year. Not once, every year. Her voice grew stronger. Because the habits that damage the lives of the people sitting in this front row were not learned in one night. They were practiced. They were perfected. And they were protected by a system that rewarded silence. Naomi set her prepared notes aside. She did not need them anymore. I was handcuffed on Division Road by an officer who decided I looked suspicious because I was black and it was dark. The room went completely still. He searched my car without a warrant. He fabricated a report. He took me to a precinct in handcuffs. And while I sat on a metal bench, he and his partner laughed. Naomi raised her wrists. The physical marks were gone. The memory was not. It lived in every policy she had written since. I did not plan to become evidence. Her voice softened, but I did. She looked across the room. And if a police commissioner can be treated that way, handcuffed, searched, humiliated, and laughed at, then imagine what happens on that same street when nobody important is watching. A pause. When there is no moment where someone suddenly discovers a title. When there is no captain walking through the door. When there is no viral video. When there is no public hearing. Naomi turned toward Bernice Tate. That is who these reforms are for. Her voice tightened with emotion. Not for me. For every Bernice Tate who wrote her complaint in pencil because she could not afford a lawyer. For every Darius Sims who stopped believing in the system because the system stopped believing in him. For every name in those 14 files. She paused. And for every name we will never know, because they never filed a complaint at all. The room began standing, not all at once. Bernice first, then Darius, then the other victims, then officers in the back, then nearly everyone. After the ceremony, Naomi walked through the city hall lobby. A woman she did not recognize stepped forward from the crowd. Around 50 years old, gray coat, hands folded carefully in front of her. Commissioner Whitaker? Yes, my name is Teresa Hadley. Naomi listened. Vernon Hadley is my husband. Naomi immediately remembered him. The retired postal worker. The man forced onto the pavement in the rain. He testified at the hearing, Teresa said. I remember. Teresa reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a photograph. The corners were creased. The paper had been worn soft from years of handling. It showed Vernon's wrists after his encounter with Mercer. Red marks encircled them, the same kind of marks Naomi had worn. He took this photograph after it happened, Teresa said. He sent it to Internal Affairs. Her voice trembled. They told him it wasn't enough evidence. Naomi accepted the photograph. She held it carefully, the way something like that should have been treated from the beginning. Like evidence, like truth, like something sacred. It's enough now, Naomi said. Later, Naomi drove the same route she had taken before the traffic stop. Division Road, Luther Street, Maplewood Avenue. The streetlights were working now. Every one. New cameras had been installed at intersections. Small red lights blinked into the darkness. Naomi passed the place where Mercer had stopped her. Someone had placed a small memorial on the sidewalk. Not for Naomi alone, for all of them. A hand-painted sign read, "This is where it stopped." Naomi slowed the car. She looked at the sign, at the working streetlights, at the camera mounted above the intersection. Then she continued driving. There was still work to do. If this story made you think about someone whose truth was never believed, share it. If you have ever been pulled over and felt your heart stop for no reason other than who you are, leave your story in the comments. Your story matters. Every story matters. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Hashtag Justice for All. Hashtag Commissioner Whitaker. Hashtag Mercer Exposed. And remember this. If you only behave with decency when important people are watching, then decency was never truly part of your character. Who you are is revealed by how you treat the person you believe has no power. The person with no title, no influence, no audience. Because one day, the person you dismissed as a nobody may be the one holding the pen that determines your future. Do not gamble your character on the belief that no one important is watching. How you treat people when you think they cannot do anything for you or to you is who you really are.